We developed the Guardian Law Enforcement Defensive Tactics Training Program for police officers because in law enforcement, there is no continuing education of defensive tactics training. A recruit learns it in the police academy for the first time. That's when they're introduced to it. And they never again practice those techniques that they learn in the police academy. So that's a recipe for disaster for a police officer. They're taught these things one time over a 6-month period, and then they're brought out into the world to go use these things. A year after, 2 years after, 3 years after, and so on, you lose the things that you don't continue to train in. And how do we expect our officers to keep up with that training when we're not providing it for them? So that's a recipe for a disaster for an officer and for a suspect. We can't keep people safe and we can't keep ourselves safe because there's no training for us once we graduate from the police academy. So we put this program together. It strictly adheres to all the guidelines with respect to use of force, Attorney General guidelines, duty to intervene, de-escalation, and all of the things that matter when it comes to an officer using force. It's not like a martial artist or training someone how to fight. We have rules and we have to follow those rules. So what's unique about our program is it works for every officer, regardless of skill level, regardless of athleticism, regardless of body type, regardless if they've ever had training in the past. You don't need a foundation in martial arts to learn this program and learn it effectively. We chose the best moves that develop the best control of a suspect that are powerful and safe. You don't need to be an expert in anything except this program, and you will become an expert when you go through the curriculum. We chose simple moves that are repetitive in many circumstances, which helps build muscle memory for the officers, and they're getting it in a condensed version where they can apply it in every situation. It's not difficult. You don't need to be in shape. You don't need to have prior training. This works for every police officer across the board. So in our curriculum, we teach our officers how to defend against a choke and defend against a strike because they will likely face those things during their career at some point. However, we don't teach officers to utilize those things, even though in certain circumstances they can be used lawfully. De-escalation is always the preferred method of resolving a conflict, an arrest, any situation. But that doesn't always work. De-escalation is plan A. We always want to use plan A first, obviously. Plan A doesn't work. Where does the officer that doesn't have training go? They go to techniques that they maybe learned 10 or 15 years ago, if they even remember them. And that's not going to work. So you learn the techniques from us, you practice them, you get confident with them. De-escalation is going to be much more powerful and it's going to work more often than it doesn't. And then if it doesn't, you have plan B to go to, which is the defensive tactics that we're training you in. In our training sessions, we put officers through real world scenarios in the training room. So they'll learn the techniques, they'll practice the techniques, and then we put them in live situations. In those live situations, they're developing confidence because it shows them that the techniques work. They take that confidence out on the road with them, and they are able to de-escalate situations much more confidently. A properly trained officer will actually use less force than an officer that has no training. The properly trained officer comes to the table with confidence and can safely de-escalate or buy time for backup, whereas an officer that doesn't have the training may panic because they're not confident and they may resort to higher levels of force. The properly trained officer uses less force because of the confidence he develops from the program.